Okay, so we will officially call ourselves to order for our policy meeting, and I will begin by requesting a motion to approve our minutes from October 24th.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. Dr. Crane, am I turning it over to you?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Welcome to today's policy committee meeting. There's 3 items on the agenda, and we're going to start with the revision of 2 items based on a law that goes into effect on December 1 that updates the kind of reporting that we do to the Department of Public Instruction regarding offenses. So we're going to revise 2 policies kind of in concert with each other. The first one is Policy 4040, Staff-Student Relations, and I'll invite our HR staff to the table for that revision.
Are we on? There we go. By now, you are getting familiar with our policy gurus in HR, Kendra Hill and Sally Potofsky, through our policy migration efforts, focusing on human resources policy. Today, we are not bringing a policy as a result of migration, but as Dr. Crane said, just bringing into compliance recommendations for our current policy in response to a new law that was recently changed and goes into effect. So Kendra Hill and Sally Potofsky will go over those changes more in detail with you.
Thank you, AJ. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are presenting to you policy 4040/7310. That is our staff-student relations policy. And as AJ mentioned, this policy has been modified based upon a new statute, the Protect Our Students Act, which goes into effect on December 1st. The School Boards Association has made recommendations for modifications to our existing policy 4040/7310, and we want to present those modifications for the board to review. I will tell you that this is not our efforts at looking at this policy for migration purposes, as AJ said. We will look at the policy and later probably present more modifications to this policy based upon a review of current practices, making sure everything is aligning. But we wanted to get this to you as soon as possible due to the December 1st effective date of the underlying law. The new policy, or the modification to the policy, is in Section C, number 4, dealing with reporting of misconduct. The statute specifies that certain school administrators have to report now to the State Board of Education rather than to the state superintendent certain types of misconduct. And you're required to report those things when there is reason to believe that an employee has engaged in misconduct or there's actual notice of a complaint of misconduct. The policy defines the word misconduct consistent with the statute to include those types of actions that are prohibited by the licensure law, which lays out some of the prohibited actions for our licensed employees. It also adds language indicating that if an employee resigns within 30 days of a complaint for misconduct, that is considered to be presumed to be because of the misconduct if there's a resignation. So that just goes to what we have to report and when we have to report it if there is a concern with regard to a resignation. It also requires us to report within 5 days of a resignation or a dismissal. And it makes it clear that failure to report is not just resulting in a suspension or revocation of an administrator's license, but also is considered to be a felony. One of the additional things that the statute does is to make it clear that this applies to students who are also 6 months after they are no longer students. So it goes a little beyond right now in terms of the definition of students and includes that extra 6 months. So someone post-graduation could be included in this as well. But basically, the purpose of the statute is to modify those requirements so that our school administrators understand the reporting requirements, understand the misconduct has to be reported within 5 days, and makes it clear that we are reporting matters consistent with the licensure statute, which lays out several different areas that could result in a revocation of a license in addition to the infliction of physical injury against a child.
Is that your, I'm done?
That is my, I'm done.
Okay, I'll start with Dr. Egan around the table.
Thank you. You promised that there'll be more discussion in a future time of the rest of this policy.
Yes.
My main question, just to clarify, is the 5 days, is that a business day, 5 consecutive days, or what is it?
I'm going to check to see if the statutory provision defines days. Give me just one moment. I don't see it listed in there. Yeah, it just says within 5 days of dismissal or the disciplinary action. I have to see if there is clarification within the statute elsewhere with regard to the definition of days here. I don't see it in the information that we have right now with regard to the modification of the statute, but we will make sure we are clear on that. Thank you.
So, under number 4, where it says a licensed employee has engaged in misconduct resulting in dismissal. So when I first read this, my concern was, or I wanted to clarify, this is, these people mentioned in number 4 have to report if it results in dismissal, not if someone is accused of something. Is that correct?
It's if it results in dismissal, disciplinary action, or resignation. And if someone resigns within 30 days of a complaint, it's presumed to be a resignation, so they would need to report that anyway. So it could be a complaint, but generally it's with some sort of disciplinary action or a result of disciplinary action or resignation.
I was just going to make a motion that we move this, that we adopt this and move it to, we're not ready for that? All right, yep. Well, then I got nothing.
Thank you. Just briefly, going back to following up the question, this is a complaint against a licensed employee, but there are other adults that, do work for the school system in the buildings at a time. Are they covered under another policy, or are there other protections in those situations?
Yes, that we do have other requirements with regard to reporting, and as well as this particular, the Protect Our Students Act actually modifies some of those other requirements as well with regard to reporting. So, for example, us as personnel administrators have a reporting requirement as well. This is just changing the reporting requirement here specific to what has to be reported to the State Board of Education by our school administrators.
And so any other existing reporting requirements, like to law enforcement or others, are still here and they're not unchanged by this?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ask our question. But he left it for me. So thank you for your clarification. Also, in number 4, it's the red line through removing all of the sexual abuse and just solely concentrates on physical injury.
I believe that is done because if you see the provision 115C-270.35, That's the statute that deals with licensure revocation, and it lays out numerous of those areas. Murder.
I'm looking at it, that's why
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking, because I'm looking at the statute, but we only left physical injury and not the entire long list of 1 through 23.
Yeah, I think it's just because it references 1 through 23 by referencing the statute. Previously, there was a discussion, more of a discussion of sexual abuse and physical injury, but because the statutory provisions in 115C-270.35 go ahead and lay out some of those sexual abuses, it seems to be an effort to simplify it a little bit and just reference that statute, which already addresses sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, all of these different other types of crimes against students. So I believe that was the idea there for streamlining that, but still, it's still incorporated by referencing this statute.
Yeah, which makes sense for those of us who are policy gurus. It doesn't for a parent who is looking through our policy manual specifically to determine the outcome of an educator who has committed one of these 1 through 23 crimes. So that's my concern is, again, I always read the policy from, if I'm a parent, how do I find this? So if
Understood.
I'm a parent and this is our policy, and I know that our Title IX policies will come up, but if I look at this, clearly this also speaks directly to licensure suspension, which again, we get a lot of emails from parents wanting to know those outcomes. So I guess my point is, we would have to tell them that if a parent is looking for it themselves, they're not going to find it in our search engine if they're looking for any sexual misconduct that has happened. Because now the language will be removed and it'll only be pointing to the statute, which they can look up the statute like I did.
And I believe the statute is linked in our policy and would be something
Okay.
that is linked there. I think it's linked in the current policy. Let me just double check.
I know. I'm not looking at the current one, sorry, I'm only looking at the revised.
Yeah, that is linked in the current policy already, so that, and it goes straight to that list of all of those other crimes that would be involved there. And again, this is really focused on just modifying this so that we can be sure that we're complying with the requirements for reporting for our administrators.
Oh, I understand, I just wasn't sure why marking through would take us out of compliance if we left it here.
And I will just tell you that that is the recommendation that came over to us from the School Boards Association as a part of cleaning up the policy. So it's not something where we felt like we needed to remove that, but we went ahead and accepted that recommendation because we see that that sexual abuse is a part of that list of
So I have a
crimes.
question, are we out of compliance if we don't strike through all of that language?
I'm not sure about out of compliance. As long as you have the statutory reference, I think you'll be okay. As you noted, there are 23 specific offenses that it's a felony not to report. I think that maybe one of the problems, these are School Board Association edits, which makes sense to me. I think probably the reason for striking a general reference to sexual abuse is that that's not the same as the 23 specific acts that are felonies not to report. So in theory, there could be something that one might consider sexual abuse, but it is not subject to this particular reporting requirement. It might be reported anyway by HR, but it would be inaccurate to say it's a felony not to report.
Well, our laws are
all
very
sex-
distinct. Sexual assault is actually not really our statute. Our statutory language is sexual offense.
Abuse, right, which is, that's
yeah.
my point, it's a vague term that could, that's not as precise as the 23 specific offenses. You could, of course, cut and paste the list of all 23 offenses into this policy. The downside is it would be long and cumbersome.
Well, I guess the
and,
only
you
reason,
know,
so
list of
here's why I would
criminal
imagine
definitions.
it was lifted up the first time and why I think it's important as a catch-all is because the other list of crimes, while important, are kidnapping, abduction of children, which are not the same as crimes that we often see happening in our school community. We often see sexual abuse and sexual misconduct happening in our school community. It's less unlikely we're hearing a teacher abducting a kid. So my guess is whoever wrote this the first time clearly articulated the things that we actually see happening, unfortunately, in a school setting. But I will circle back to this the next time we visit this policy. But that's my concern, is the policy as written the first time made sense to me because that is actually the crimes we see in school settings. Mr. Hager.
Thank you. And Chair Johnson Hustle, I support exactly where you're coming from on this. And I know that it is what you got in terms of the recommended language, but I think maybe they didn't consider all of the reasons that have just been stated. It might be something that if you were looking to shorten it, you could even, going back to the original policy, have a statement, something like, that would justify automatic revocation of the employee's license, or you know, in conduct that involves physical or sexual abuse of a child, and then put, or, you know, would justify automatic revocation of the child's license pursuant to the statute, and then strike the rest. But by striking the physical or sexual abuse where it is under the recommended policy, it's like it erases it from someone's search or someone's concern. I believe you could simply just change the ordering of that, keep that in that original sentence, and then just reference the statute with a link so that parents could look it up. And you might not need everything on the rest of that, but then you're still raising up sexual abuse as one of the reasons that could trigger the suspension. It's not a specific amendment, I just offer it as a one alternative.
Yeah.
And I would
Thank you.
suggest, as if you do want to go in that direction, you could do something along the lines of a phrase that would reference physical or sexual abuse that is covered by GS 115C 270.35. So it's clear you're not expanding the list, but you're giving, again, for people who are searching for policies or don't want to bother to cross-reference all 23 policies, they'll have some general idea what it's about.
I'll accept that friendly amendment, too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Looks like staff are capturing it. Is that right?
Yes, we're
Okay.
capturing it. I think one thing maybe we can do is say physical abuse or sexual abuse covered, or put the sexual abuse first, just so that we make it clear that the sexual abuse is referencing the statute. The physical abuse, I think they left in there independently because it's not.
It's not in
That's
one
a
of
good
the
point.
lists. That's a
Because
great
the physical
point.
abuse need not be a crime.
Yeah.
So maybe a better way to phrase it would be
Yeah.
to say something like
Exactly.
sexual offenses or other criminal acts covered by GS 115C-270.35B. Again, the point being, it's not anything under the sun, it's these 23
these.
items, but it gives you some sense of what those 23 items are.
Right, because physical injury or physical abuse doesn't necessarily have to result in injury.
Correct.
Exactly. That's
So-
right.
Well, yeah, it's the infliction of physical injury is reportable even if it's not a criminal act that's in that list, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Hill,
Yes.
and Mr. Ramey, and Mr. Hager.
We will work on that.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Caulfield, did you have anything?
No, I'm just going to second or third, I guess, what you said. I think it actually is important to keep that specific language in there. Thank you.
Thank you for working on it. Thank you. All right.
Are you all okay with us going ahead and bringing it for first reading, or?
Yes, you can bring it for first reading with those changes, and then if.
Okay.
Oh, we can see it there, we can still discuss it on first reading.
Okay.
If need be, but I think we're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks for clarifying with me, my apologies.
Was there a motion to do that?
Yes.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor, please know by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey.
All right, thank you all.
All right, our second policy on the agenda is 4240-7312, child abuse and related threats to child safety. So I'll welcome our new Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services. I think you already know her, Michelle Woodson, and Michael Pesch and Crystal Reardon to the table to speak to us about the revisions you'll see in this policy. One does parallel the revision that we just made in 4040. Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you today. So today we are bringing policy 4240 forward, which is child abuse and related threats to child safety. We are updating two sections. One of those is going to be similar to what was just mentioned because of state legislation that will take place on December 1st of 2023. So the first section, will be Section D, and it is a duty to report licensed employees to the State Board of Education. In addition to other reporting requirements of this policy, any administrator who has reason to believe or actual notice of a complaint that a licensed employee has engaged in misconduct resulting in dismissal, disciplinary action, resignation, shall report that information to the State Board of Education in accordance with subsection C4 of Policy 4040, which we also referenced, 7310, staff-related relations. For purposes of this section, misconduct is defined as that it would justify a automatic revocation of an employee's license pursuant to General Statute 115C 270.35B, or the infliction of physical injury against a child by other than by accident or in self-defense. So we would most definitely make a similar recommendation to what we just talked about a few minutes ago with regards to this particular portion of the policy.
Would the policy committee like that, to us to include the very same language? Okay.
That would be my preference.
So
Thank
it
you
will
for
say sexual offenses or other criminal acts covered by, and then the statutory reference.
Just to revise my own revision, since the word conduct's already there, that we could just say, for purposes of this section, misconduct is any sexual offense or other criminal conduct that would justify automatic revocation. It flows nicely. It would be the same change in both places.
Yes.
It's just
Okay.
adding a few words.
Thank
All
you.
right, perfect. All right, so the next section is Section H, which is child abuse and neglect information and resources for students, and in accordance with General Statute 115C-4765 and the State Board of Education Policy SHLT 003, the school system will provide information on child abuse and neglect, including age-appropriate information on sexual abuse to students in grades 6 through 12. Such as information will be provided in the form of a document given to all students in grades 6 through 12 at the beginning of each school year, and a display posted in visible, high-traffic areas throughout each secondary school. And we have been doing this for the past 2 years already, so happy to respond to any questions around that.
Ms. Edmonds?
Thank you. I have two questions. So again, if we could go back, and one is about D and one is in H. So with D, I just want to repeat my question, and please forgive me, but it's not, this doesn't apply to an employee that has been accused of something. It has to be that results in dismissal or disciplinary action, or they resign, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then my question in Section H is, I'm very concerned about how this impacts grades K-5, and I don't know what our practice is currently about education, such as helping young children understand like good touch versus bad touch. Is this now prohibiting that?
The policy itself is not, the policy itself is not addressing that, but we have a required funny tummy feelings for all of our first grade students. If for some reason our students move into our Wake County Public School System having not experienced the funny tummy feelings training, for lack of a better word, for our students, then they receive that experience as a second grade student. So we do have that good touch, bad touch opportunity, and we teach them at a very early age around that. We partner with Safe Child to deliver that training for all of our students.
And this new legislation does not prohibit that, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that's the case. There are districts who have prohibited this because of Senate Bill 49, hence Ms. Edmonds' question. Thank you, Ms. Edmonds, for asking the question. Ms. Caulfield?
Sorry. I have two questions, if that's okay. The first is there is several spots where the DCDEE is crossed out, and they crossed out what it stands for. I'm wondering why they did that.
I believe the revision was just to, that those things occur earlier in the paragraph. So in the second paragraph of the policy, there's a reference to the Department of Health and Human Services, so they move a DHHS there. And then there's a reference to the Division of Child Development and Early Education, and they put the DCDEE there, as opposed to having it below. Since it was already spelled out, I believe they crossed it out there and just put the acronym above.
Just to not be redundant, okay.
Yes.
And then my second question is, it's actually in G, it's not in a revision, but while we're on the policy, it says in even numbered years, they provide the sexual abuse and sexual trafficking education. Has it ever been considered, especially with, a lot of heightened news and things that happen, that we do that once a year instead of every other year?
We offer that once a year to all employees. It's required. It's part of our staff awareness training at the beginning of each school year and upon hiring.
Okay. It just says in the policy in even number of years, so that's why I was asking.
Right, I think that's the state requirement, but we make
Okay,
it every year.
so we just do every year anyway. Okay, thank you.
I know in your description, you went through H. After section H, there's additional language that was in the original policy that was struck. I just didn't know why that was removed.
I believe that language has basically been moved and inserted back to section D. It became a new section D, and it's replaced with a new reporting requirement language there.
So I'm matching up the two, and I see in addition to other reporting requirements, what about the superintendent developing necessary procedures?
That I do not know why the School Board Association would recommend we strike that. That was
Okay.
not a staff strike.
Okay.
It's listed on page 1, Mr. Hershey.
Okay, I missed it back there. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Hershey.
That's a move. Thank you.
All right, move to first read. Perfect, thank you so much.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries, thanks.
Our third policy that we're discussing today, and this is a continuation from last month, is a conversation about policy 1310, parental involvement. You have numerous attachments to this item in your agenda. So before we go through the feedback that we received, I just want to remind you of what's in the policy. That we must adopt this policy by January 1st, 2024. This is a new policy. It's part of the North Carolina School Boards Association's policy manual. Significant portions of this policy are included for compliance with Senate Bill 49, the Parents' Bill of Rights. Section A of the policy provides information on plans to involve parents. It includes school-specific parental involvement plans as part of our strategic plan work in family and community engagement, and references our Title I Parent and Family Engagement Plan and the associated policy 1320-3560. Section B provides information on communicating with parents, encouraging parents to participate at schools, and teacher conferences with parents. Several parts of this section have been included to address requirements of the Parents' Bill of Rights. Section C provides details about parental notifications, such as Title I notifications, the newly required parent guide for student achievement, annual notifications, and parental opportunities to opt out. Section D provides a list of activities for which parental permission is required. Section E is entirely based on the Parents' Bill of Rights and Senate Bill 49 and addresses parental involvement in student health, physical and mental. The numbered items within this section address the topics such as notifying parents of name and pronoun changes, encouraging students to discuss their well-being with their parents, and the prohibition of instruction on gender identity, sexual activity, and sexuality in grades K through 4. This section also includes a detailed portion on addressing parental concerns. Section F is another section based entirely on Senate Bill 49 and addresses parental requests for information. It details processes, timelines, and appeal procedures. Section G, another Senate Bill 49 requirement, asks us to list community services available to students and parents in our school system. We're going to provide a link there to a page on our website where we will keep those instead of listing them here in policy. And finally, Section H provides the reporting requirement of parental involvement information to the State Board of Education. Now, statute required that the policy be developed in consultation with parents, teachers, administrators, and community partners. And you can see that much of the policy was dictated by Senate Bill 49 and the Parent Bill of Rights. Staff did conduct a thought exchange online. I think you are familiar with that format. We use it across the district in several areas, as we believed it was the best way to reach the greatest number of our constituents, parents, staff, and community partners. Our thought exchange ran for 3 weeks, approximately 3 weeks, from October 26th to November 15th. Invitations for participation were sent to all school administrators, all WCPSS staff, instructional and non-instructional, all WCPSS parents, and WCPSS community partner agency contacts. So what did we ask? And I'm going to go through a couple of slides now here in the presentation. The question we asked on our thought exchange was, what thoughts and questions do you have about Policy 1310, parental involvement? The feedback that we got, we had 3,195 participants who gave us 1,117 thoughts and provided 32,465 ratings on those thoughts. Of that participation, approximately 70% was from parents. 20% was teacher participation. About 2% was principal or assistant principal participation, and then we had some Wake County community member and other engaged citizen participation. We did want to note for you the number of languages that were provided during participation. We do think the unknown language is probably someone just submitting a not applicable, an NA, or a test or something like that. So what themes did we hear? Here are the themes that we heard. The conversation really revolved around the importance of parental involvement and the need for clear communication between school and home. Parents are concerned about the amount of control they will have over the classroom, and other parents are worried about the lack of transparency in grading and assignments. Parents are also concerned about the lack of access to materials and the potential for political agendas to be pushed in the classroom. Teachers are concerned about the responsibility delegated to them and the potential for legal issues. Administrators are worried about inconsistency across the system. So those are the themes that emerged from the feedback. In reviewing, and I'll nod to Leanne Keith here, Dr. Alfred Keith was our thought exchange guru, and we reviewed and spoke about the data frequently as it was coming in. Most of the feedback that we got was not about the individual policy. It was about application of policy and consistent application of policy across all schools and for all students. Is that fair? That's fair. So these were the emerging themes. I want to speak with you just for a second about common ground. The remarkable thing about the feedback that we got was that there was very low alignment. And in the thought exchange world, that means opinions were varied. and skewed in one direction or the other. The opinions that were shared were not very aligned. So rather than talk with you about what people disagreed on or the far ends, we want to talk with you about the common ground that emerged. The areas of importance that came out of all the comments were it is important for parents to be involved in their children's education. Equity is important for all students and families. It's important to protect the rights of teachers to teach without fear of retaliation. And it is important to maintain a safe and respectful school environment for all students. What were the needs that were generated? We need open communication between parents, teachers, and school administration. We need support from outside agencies. We need clear and easily accessible information on school policies and curriculum. And we need more opportunities for parents to volunteer and be involved in the school community. When we looked at next steps, the input suggests that we ensure clear communication and collaboration between parents, teachers, and school administration, including addressing concerns about curriculum, addressing concerns about student well-being, and parental involvement while respecting the rights and privacy of students and teachers. The input also suggests that we establish consistent practices across all schools and provide support and resources for teachers and parents to effectively engage in their children's education. Again, the feedback was less about the policy and more about how we implement and respond, how we implement our practices and how we respond to parental concerns. Some sections of our policy are now very explicit about how we must do that, within 10 days or 20 days if we need extra time, etc. So this was our thought exchange feedback. We can engage with some discussion on that, or I can walk you through the draft policy that everyone saw, had access to. But let me stop here and see if you have any questions. No questions here. Okay. Well, as we attached the draft of the policy, you have a policy that is stamped draft. That is the version of the policy that was online. Let me just point out a couple of changes that we made last time that are present in the draft policy. In item 1, page 1, item 1, we made parental involvement plans part of our strategic plan. On page 3 about conferences, we made a decision and Dr. Taylor concurred, very importantly, that you encourage him to work with local business leaders, et cetera, regarding time for employees to attend parent conferences. And on page 10, item 8, that this item is no longer there. We struck an item on parent permission to receive information about contraceptives and or abortion referral services because our current policy prohibits our employees to provide that. We did not feel like it needed to stay in that list as a struck-through item. We would just remove that so it no longer appears there. When the remaining part of the policy, there are new things there for us, and then there are things that are already required by statute or are best practice for us. Are there any questions that you have about this policy? Well, we can start at the beginning if you would like. Do you have any questions about Section A, the parental involvement plans? This is the section where we have created, as part of the strategic plan, parental involvement plans for every school that are school specific and will fall under our family and community engagement work in the strategic plan. And the second part of that has to do with our Title I family engagement plans. Those are required by federal policy. Our staff is engaged in that work. Do you have any questions about that section, Section A?
Ms. Goffin, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I know you're putting a lot of work into this, so appreciate it. On Section A, I'm wondering how and why how we prioritize, because it says that the principal shall, and one of the things that I noticed in our feedback, our thought exchange, is that they were talking about transparency, consistency, like having, like you mentioned, implementation. So I'm just wondering, just because we have 200 schools, and that could vary in every different school, why are we not as a district making the policy and what is expected from each school than each individual 200 schools?
For the parental involvement plan? Well, we thought placing it under our strategic plan would give it more district-wide application. I know that Chief Lisa Luton is the head of that section, and I believe that there will be, and I know that Dr. Alfred Keith is here too, and she oversees that work for the strategic plan. The thought is that district staff will work with schools to develop these plans. What is needed in the eastern part of the county may be different than what is needed in the western part of the county. A low-income school, a high-income school, and we want schools to be able to generate a parent involvement plan that works best for their parents. So, while I don't have a crystal ball, I believe that there will be some standards for that are set at the district level, and then the ability for a school to get specific about how it wants to reach its parents. Am I speaking? Yeah? Okay, thank you.
I think that was one of my concerns, because I hear that most often, is the consistency and what the Wake County School District expects all of our schools to do versus having an interpretation of what the plan could look like. And I do appreciate that we have 200 schools, and it will definitely look different in different districts, but I think a bigger statement as Wake County as a whole, like this is what we expect all of our schools to do, because we are such a large organization, and we are in the business of education, so it should really kind of look the same, or at least have the same baseline, and I think that should really come more from us than individual schools. The way it reads to me, it's more up to the individual school. And I fear that that is one of the problems that we face, is having inconsistency.
I can tell you the listed elements there, A through H, are part of the State Board of Education policy, PRNT 000. So those items are noted as essential elements and should be promoted. So I imagine those elements will, because they are part of State Board policy, would be reflected in the work that we do.
Okay.
I want to clarify, because that was my follow-up to you. It says the plan must include at a minimum. So all of them have to at least have as A through 8.
8.
Am I on the wrong version? Because there is like 6 tabs.
Let me see.
Because I don't see that verbiage.
Right there, the plan must include at minimum, and then you have to include these.
Okay.
You see it?
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions about Section A? Mr. Haggerty?
So, you know, I guess the bigger question is, in regards to Section A, but in regards to the whole policy, how much of this is required of us specifically by state law or board policy? You just said this one section comes from the state board policy. Like, I could go through here and I could ask you, well, what does be responsible parenting mean? Or what does, you know, what do you envision some of these phrases meaning? But is this something is this language that's been given to us that we sort of have to adopt? Or is this something where we have any sort of like discretion?
So one of the items that's included in the attached materials is the School Board Association's model policy that's footnoted,
Okay.
heavily footnoted. I'm not sure how many footnotes it has, 73, 74, something like that. So that you can see as you move through there, this one is legally required, this one is optional. For example, parental involvement plans as a specific plan, like an entity thing that you produce, that's not actually required. These elements of promoting family involvement, parental involvement, are. Just like every principal is working with their PTA and their community to promote parental involvement, and these are the elements that the State Board of Education are important. But the requirement of a specific or explicit plan, that's not a state requirement. It was the staff's belief that the best way to handle this was to make it a little more explicit by having it fall, yes, let's do have specific school plans. And let's have it fall under our strategic plan work, because that's where we thought it lived. As it was first described in the draft policy or in the model policy from the School Board Association, it's part of the school improvement plan. In speaking with our senior administrators who work with our area superintendents, the school improvement plan is very specific. It's a very specific format. There are very specific items. The district has chosen a set of items that every school must address to speak to. The district expects that every school will address these items in their school improvement plan. And the parental involvement plan is nowhere in that. So we thought, school improvement plans aren't the best place for that to live. We do think it's a good idea to have one, and we think it's best placed with our strategic plan work. So that's one small example. Many other footnotes involved here.
Thank you. And so going to the one that you directed me toward, I can now sort of see, like, section by section, what's required, what sort of gives some discretion. As we're going through it, just in the interest of time, if you want to even just point out, I'm going to use the footnoted one that you've suggested, but just so everybody knows this is required versus this was something that opened, it'll help maybe guide our discussion a little bit better, so we're not discussing stuff that we don't have
Sure.
any
We
say
can do
over.
that between staff and me, and for your information, the list in section A1 is out of state board policy. to
I
direct
wondered
answer
as
that
much.
question. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Those are specifically stated elements in state board policy. Yes. And
That's not to say that this is all you can say on the subject. You can, of course, amplify. These are subjects that you have to address, and so the approach, as Dr. Crane said here, is to require each school to develop a parent engagement plan that's consistent with the parameters of the policy. You could be more prescriptive in the policy if you choose.
this is probably also a good time to acknowledge that sometimes statute, whether federal or state, dictates a school board must have a policy on. And many times it does not. That does not mean we are not meant to adhere to those statutes and policies. We are held to that expectation. This policy is one where the School Board Association has rightfully placed a lot of that kind of language with regard to informing parents, involving parents. We even thought it probably should be titled parental informing and involving or something, because there's a lot of informing parents in this policy. Not just involving them, but informing them as well. Because informing someone does not mean you are involving them. Dr. Ng.
I don't want to belabor the point, but in response to Ms. Caulfield, I thought that having the principal be of each school being the ones to kind of spearhead the design of the implementation. I think it's a appropriate thing to do. I think we can't micromanage, but at the same time, I'm hoping that there are some conversations among principals to kind of have conversations of what's kind of what works and what doesn't work, and so that there's at least there's some uniformity of approach.
Yes.
So, a bigger question. The document, or one of the attachments that has a lot of gray highlighting and the blue.
Yes.
I am not clear what
Okay.
that's showing us. What, and I was looking for a key and I didn't see one. If I'm missing it.
That
my
document
apologies.
I provided at our last meeting in October as a, here are the revisions that we're looking at. So I thought that would be an informative historical document for you to take a look at. Everything in that document that's shaded in gray is SB 49,
Thank you.
and there's a lot of it.
And
That-
the blue edits are edits that staff and attorneys have made for your consideration to the model NCSBA policy. Is that correct?
That's correct. It does not reflect those 3 items that I mentioned earlier that we took some action on and made some deletions or made some revisions. Those changes are not reflected in that document, but they are reflected in the document stamped draft that was placed online for feedback. Shall we move to Section B? Hearing no further questions. Section B speaks to parent communication and participation in conferences. You will see in this section, or if you're not referencing back and forth, almost the entirety of Section 1, communication with parents, has to do with Senate Bill 49. Huge chunks of that. Item 2, parent participation at schools, that is an inclusion from Senate Bill 49. Related, Section 3 is set apart to kind of address or be more specific about conferences with teachers and parent conferences at schools. Do you have any questions about Section B?
Thank you. So, number 1, the third paragraph, it says that the materials will be offered at the school, available at the school's main office. Why wouldn't it also be online, like on the school's website? And then later in this document, in this policy on another page, it references something being housed in the school library for parents to be able to access. And I just wonder, I think it should be in one place but we can get to that. It's
Okay.
in another section.
It is in another section, yes. So as far as the main office about extracurricular activities, I think many schools do have those on their websites. Would you like for that to say, rather than say in the school's main office, would you rather have it be online?
I would love for it to say that it should be online, because if it's only available in the main office, that requires a parent to physically go to the school. And if they can have access to it online, if they choose, they should be able to access it that way. So I think that should be a requirement. Otherwise, we are requiring people to go physically into the building. And then further down, just to keep in this section, it's also in number 1, the 5th paragraph, speaking to the reading progress of young students. Aren't we already doing that?
We are. The written notification of a student's reading progress is accomplished through Home Connect M-Class reports. Yes, sir.
So I want to address the issue about the websites. So there's, again, every time we think about things, we need to think through like the pros and the cons. And what I worry about is, as we've been reminded, the websites for all 200 schools are mostly volunteer managed. And if you go to the websites looking for current information, oftentimes it's difficult to find. And so if we're talking about meeting a statutory requirement that any parent has a right to get certain information, and by our policy we're requiring it to be on the website, and then a parent goes and it's not on the website, then we're in violation of policy, and potentially someone could argue in violation of the law. And so based on kind of our current website capacity, I don't think that we should require it by policy to be on there, because as oftentimes as some of this information could change, a new club is started, a club disbands, new curriculum is added, a class is not offered, I know that just going and looking up sometimes like what classes or electives are available to my kids for signing up isn't always up to date. And if we have this kind of new legal stress behind it, this impetus that we're going to provide this information as like a government right to the parents and we can't maintain it, I would just feel I don't know that we could deliver that. And so I don't know, I think we could encourage it and have the policy recommend or encourage current information be put on the website, but I don't want to guarantee that it will be available in case we can't deliver.
Here's what the statute says. The statute says that it requires board policy to establish a process for parents to learn about the nature and purpose of clubs and activities offered at their child's school, including both curricular and extracurricular activities. So the process can be modified. That we make it known or have a process to make it known is required.
I appreciate what you're saying. I'm happy to, back off of that being put in policy. Another conversation for another day. Our school websites should not be run by volunteers. They should be more, yes.
But let's come back to it because just a lot of the administrative requirements that are going to be required under state law, under this state law, are either going to put a lot more stress on our existing employees or are going to require more administrative support in our buildings. There's just no way that we can comply with all the demands with the workforce that we have right now. So definitely coming back at another time. I'd like to lend my voice to that.
Kind of to the point that is being raised, do we have to spell out that it's going to be in the school's main office? Because it feels like not all activities, I don't know the definition of all clubs and activities. And is that a realistic, is that something that's realistic that's going to be in the school's main office?
Well, the
I mean,
statute
as an
says the
activity?
board, the policy has to establish, quote, "a process for parents to learn about the nature and purpose of clubs and activities offered at their child's school, including both curricular and extracurricular activities." So however they access the information, we just need to have a process, whether it's paper in the front office, online, both, call the front office, matters not. What matters is that there is a process.
Okay.
Am I speaking out of turn, Neil? Is that?
I think that's right. And to Mr. Hershey's point, I did circle the word activities and put a question mark next to it the first time I read the statute. What do they mean here? Anything could be an activity. I think what's helpful is that the examples are including both curricular and extracurricular activities. So curricular, we understand what that means. Extracurricular activities, more in the nature of an established club. So I don't think there's a statutory requirement here to list for the front office to have a list of every event of any kind that may be happening in the school on any given day. A classroom celebration, for example, I don't think would, just my common sense interpretation of the word activity. I think what they're looking for is clubs and extracurricular sports, things like that are accessible to all students.
That's very helpful, because I was wondering about activities. That's what really jumped out at me. Having clubs is easy, but it's the activities part. So thank you for that clarification.
So just wanted to clarify, when it refers to the school's main office, is it analogous to the differential between the church building and the people in the church? You're talking about the main office, like the actual room, or is it the people in the room? The knowledge of those information is within the people in the main office. Is that what you're referring to, or is it actually posted on the board in the main office?
I don't know exactly what the policy was contemplating, or the language the attorneys at the school board associations were contemplating when they suggested that exact language. But since it says should contact the main office, I'm guessing that is the people in the main office rather than the cork board, which shall be installed in the, the front office of every school kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying, like with any entity, you usually go to the front office, so that's where your information would be, right? Activities, I was taking anything that is not officially a club. Like if you had a birthday party or something, I would assume that would be a classroom thing and not really posted, versus an activity that's happening at the school is something that would be posted. Did you have an idea of where you would want it to be if it wasn't in the office? Yeah. Oh, I thought you asked that. Oh. So with regards to the office, is that part of the statute, or is that just our suggestion?
That was just a suggestion made by the School Board Association for language for consideration. That part, the actual process, can be determined by the board. And I've heard one recommendation to include on a website and in the main office, not an either or, but a both and.
Yeah, and I think, having, again, been out of school today, it is on both. But again, to Mr. Haggerty's point, the website is not really in our purview because it's volunteers. It's not, we don't have it currently as someone's job. Having it in the main office is someone's job. So I personally think you can have both to ensure that the one place where it is someone's job is the office.
That's new for me to find out that it's volunteer. That seems more like Wikipedia than it is resource that, we're getting from communications or something.
The communications gives them a template, and you can see the template's the same. I'm assuming it's just like a back-end WordPress where I go in and update the page.
It's a task assigned
Yeah.
to a staff member, and which staff member has the most availability and skill to be able to do that. The secretary, oftentimes the principal, sometimes the teacher, but they don't get a stipend for doing that work. And so oftentimes they do it after hours.
So it's not like a PTA member or a volunteer mom came in and did it. So it's not that type of volunteer. It's just somebody's not dedicated to it. Right, got it.
And again, because it's not their job, it's not getting updated every day.
May I, since I'm the one that brought up the website
Yes.
issue, would the rest of the committee be okay if we said for the website piece, where possible? Does that satisfy your concern, Mr. Haggerty?
I just know that, like, when I try to find out whether or not my kids have an athletic event and I go to their school website, it's not on there. And I've got to Google like 5 or 6 different sites to find this stuff, and I can't always find answers. And so just because this is a legal requirement under state law, maybe it's a personal thing, I just have a lot of hesitation about saying that we will provide it on the website if I don't know that we will.
I echo your sentiments. I don't like putting things in policy we don't actually manage or mandate, because it's our policy, and so therefore someone has to do it. So that is my personal preference, is unless we have someone to do it, then it shouldn't be in our actual policy, because then it's the expectation that we're able to do it.
Sorry, to Ms. Edmonds' point, like this day and age, everything is online. So if we have to reach so many families, wouldn't it be more helpful to find a way to
Oh, we
get it
agree,
on?
but you can't do that in policy. We can't find the money in policy to make that happen. But yes, I don't think you hear a disagreement, but we're writing a policy that we don't have an answer to today to ensure it gets on every website. And it's updated, because students, again, I was at a school today, they just let their students add clubs. So I don't think you can policy something that we can't verify that's going to happen, because we'll have a list of parents who can't find it on the website.
Hence the later date then, I guess?
That's my point.
Okay.
Again, that's why Mr. Haggerty said, well, we know the finance chair, and I was like, yes, but that's not for this policy table. Yeah. So yeah, you don't hear us disagreeing. You hear us saying we shouldn't put something in policy we can't actually ensure we're doing.
And I'm okay with that for right now. I really do understand that concern. So that's fine. I wanted to, since I'm the one that said to put it in, I'll withdraw.
Yes. I think we have a whole list of what we'd like to see on websites.
Okay. Moving on to section C. Section C provides the details about parental notifications such as Title I notifications, and we have a specific policy about that, 1320. And the newly required parent guide for student achievement. The State Board of Education is operating, and the Department of Public Instruction is operating under the understanding that that is required to be issued on the first day of school after January 1st, 2024, and the understanding is that is the first day of the next school year. So those would be responsible to go out in July. That is the guidance that we are getting now from DPI and the State Board of Ed on that.
And I would just add that your local guide to parent student achievement must comport with the state board policy, which doesn't exist yet. So you kind of have to wait and see what they develop.
They did discuss it at their last meeting. It was on their agenda, and they discussed creating a policy around that. So they are in the process on that. Section C also brings up or lists annual notifications and parental opportunities to opt out. So the guide, the parent guide for student achievement is item number 2. It's pretty lengthy there. Number 3, these are additional annual notifications that we make to parents. It's pretty long, goes well beyond 29 items. And then item 4 are opportunities to withhold consent or opt out. And there are quite a few of those as well. Do we have any questions about items in section C? Yes, Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. Just a comment, make sure I'm in the right section. Parental notification, correct?
Yes.
So item F, 2F, we are now being asked, we are now being mandated to tell parents about their options outside of the Wake County Public School System for their child's education, i.e. charter schools and voucher schools. And I think that's important for the public to be aware of that, and I want to know what in the world that's going to look like. Are we going to start providing a list to all parents of all the charter schools and private schools in Wake County?
If the state board template asks us to list that information, we will list that information.
Add to that. So the Department of Public Instruction is going to walk through what those requirements look like, how it needs to be outlined, in what format we need to provide it in. That's the guidance that they're developing right now. And so when that guidance is developed, we will comply with the law and how they've outlined we need to communicate that, whether it's in person, whether it's a list, whether it's contact information. That's the information that we're still awaiting.
Dr. Ng, thank you, Ms. Edmonds.
Just want to clarify, make sure that we have mentioned that if a student comes to Wake County in mid-year, will that family also be receiving this information? It mentions that you'll get it at the beginning of the school year, but what about those who come in mid-year?
We're still waiting on the guidance. But what I anticipate it will look like is similar to our current onboarding process. During registration, once they enter the school, they currently get the student-parent handbook, and we assume that this will be either included in that or accompanying that. So as part of their onboarding process, whether they start at the beginning of the school year or the middle of the school year, whether they come through CIE or they come through a school building, they would get that with everything else.
Should it be included in the language here, or would that be extraneous?
Well, we don't know yet. That's the problem of we have to be in compliance in December, and we don't actually have all the guidance from the state yet. But great question.
In section 3, item C, it says approximate dates of any non-emergency invasive physical examination and screening. What does that mean?
I know we provide that notification on page 7 of our student-parent handbook. Do you have any specific reference? Yeah, the screenings.
Well, it says non-emergency invasive physical examination or screening.
Could be screenings like eye exams, eye screenings if we do those in schools, or scoliosis screenings if we do those in schools. Those are non-invasive physical exams. I received a scoliosis screening and
Me too.
diagnosis
I know I
because of
did.
school,
Yes.
at school as a seventh grader.
Okay,
Yeah.
it just sounded
There's-
extremely intimidating.
There's actually a note on this point in the footnoted NCSBA version that says this requirement does not apply to any hearing, vision, or scoliosis screenings or any physical examination or screening that is permitted or required by state law. So it's not really entirely clear what screenings that are covered here, but again, hopefully we'll get clarity from the state board policy. And just to remind you all, that this highlighted section under 2, Parent Guide to Student Achievement, everything that's highlighted, pretty much verbatim out of the statute. That'll get fleshed out a little bit more by state board policy. Then you'll be in a position to adopt your own parent guide for student achievement that will reflect the state board requirements.
So this is the part that's not highlighted gray, SB 49, so that's why I was asking.
Yes, and that was a separate point. Yes, you're correct.
PPRA.
Separate point. That's a PPRA. It's a federal law requirement, pre-existing requirement that's just referenced here. This policy serves as a repository for a lot of notification requirements. Some of it goes beyond SB 49, but it does give you one place where it's all, it's all together and it's related to parent involvement and information for parents.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Hershey?
Just as a follow-up to Ms. Edmonds, and you can say that if we just don't have the guidance yet, is it going to be the school district's responsibility to seek out, or are these other private schools that pop up are they going to have to notify us? And I'm concerned about how we stay in compliance if we have to try to find all of these.
We await the guidance.
Okay, that's what, I just wanted to highlight it, the difficulty of it, as Ms. Edmonds pointed out, and frankly, the absurdity that we have to do this at all. It's absurd.
Dr. Creed?
No further questions, Ms. Edmonds?
Sorry, also in section 3, do we have the flexibility to report the school grade A through F rather than D or F?
And which item are you?
I'm looking at letter O.
Letter
Is
O.
section 3,
Yes,
letter O,
letter O.
about reporting the school grades as,
So this item, letter O, is part of a piece of legislation that came about when school report cards were beginning to be issued by the state. And so the requirement is that any school that receives the letter grade of D or F must alert parents that we received a letter grade of D or F. It doesn't require, I think the intent was you want to alert parents that the grade is low. School report cards are issued. We are required to, I think it's in section letter N, a report containing information about the school system and each school, including but not limited to, and student achievement, graduation rates, et cetera. All of those, we are required to give this information, and it is in that report card, and we do make parents aware of
right,
those.
and I know our district goes above and beyond those absurd A through F school letter grades to provide more information for parents to understand what is actually happening in that building. But thank you for the clarification, because that's obviously a state requirement that if it's a D or F, it has to be. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's also more that's required for DNF
Yes,
schools.
absolutely.
So just so everyone knows,
It's much longer.
there's a school improvement plan. I mean, there's a whole process you're probably familiar with. I think this is predates those other changes to the law. General Assembly never cleaned it up. It's it's really superfluous in my view, given that if a school has a DRF, much more is required than simply this one notification, but this is still a legal requirement, still in the statutes. It's just reflected here in
The
policy.
new notifications are about, like, did your school receive, meet, exceed, receive a grade of DRF and not meet or exceed or met or didn't, growth, and a whole nother set of sort of buttons regarding flashing lights that you have to let folks know about, trigger a lot of other actions behind that. And we have folks who work on those reports. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Oh, sorry.
Sir.
Just, I have one more in section 3.
Okay.
I'm forgetting how long that section is. It's number 4, opportunities to withhold consent, opt out. Do you want me to address that now or wait? Ms.
Well, we're still in this section, so go ahead.
Okay. The letter, so number 4, letter C, is where this refers to the materials being housed in the library. And so I don't know if we want to circle back to that issue of it being the school office in one place and the library in another.
My understanding, there's no footnote beside the review, available for review in the central office, is that if there's a question and a parent wants to review that information, Brian Glendenning has spoken with me about that a teacher will actually sit down with the parent and review the material. You can do it online through a Meet, and just take a look at the material so the parent can see where that is. So teachers often walk parents through that one-on-one.
Ms. Evans?
Again, I just think it's odd that we're housing some material for parental review in the media center, and that's where in policy we're referring to where that's where parents can find it, and yet the other material about clubs and activities is going to be housed in the front office. Seems to me we would want these things housed in the same place for consistency's sake, but if legislation dictates.
The legislation doesn't dictate where. I think as long as we're consistent with Policy 3540, which also addresses these requirements, we're fine to say where we would like those materials to be.
No, I mean, Ms. Evans, you're bringing up some great points here, and so long as we're not required by law to have it in the media center, I think particularly as we address our security concerns, we'd rather have visitors to the school limited to the front office rather than kind of like wandering throughout the building during the day. I mean, if there's a reason for the media center, some pros and cons, I mean, we can have that discussion. But, I mean, I see your point about the consistency, and I also see a safety issue involved as well. And to the point about the notifications, about the letter grade, again, if this is our policy and all we have to do is meet the minimums of what's required by the state, you could say that we would be required to notice all letter grades, not just the DNF. You could even put in policy that any notification specifies achievement and growth, right? So you might have a school that's had tremendous growth, still has a grade you wouldn't necessarily be proud of, but can still recognize the achievements of the parent. So we can go above and beyond, so as long as we meet that basic level of compliance.
So I guess my recommendation is to have the club activity materials housed in the front office is fine, but have this material also housed in the front office. I don't think that prevents, say a parent comes in and they are meeting with a teacher, it doesn't prevent that pair to take the material to the media center for a quieter setting to review or to the classroom to review.
And again, I think that's appropriate because this is curriculum, right? This isn't library materials that are in the library what the librarian might be managing. These are things that are used as part of the health education program. The central office or the school office seems to make more sense.
Yes. So, well, it's almost over, so you have to be. But nonetheless, is that your official amendment? It sounds like you're making an amendment, and Mr. Haggerty is seconding it. So are you,
So the
and that would just
revision-
be a strike through and moving it to the front office?
The revision that I hear is just, I hear,
Go ahead.
Ms. Caulfield.
So the only thing I'm saying is, depending on how the school is set up, there are some front offices that really barely have a chair and the secretary's office. So now you're asking for the materials to actually be reviewed there where they might not be able to sit down and review it. In the media center, I mean, I know in our schools, both elementary, middle, or all, and high school, there has been plenty of times where conferences or volunteers and everything go into the media center to help with students. Any kind of help that you're helping with a teacher, we wouldn't do it in the hallway just because of the distraction. We would actually walk over to the media center. I was still a volunteer, so I was there for a reason with a purpose. So I'm not sure that it is adding any security issue. If you're signing and you're coming in, you're secure, they know why you're there, and then you're taking your business to the media center to kind of review, whether it be books, whether it be, instructional material. I'm just not sure that that's going to cause a safety issue versus clogging up. Some of the front offices that we have are quite congested, especially with like kids coming in and out and student services. Everybody's kind of moving around in that front office. I'm not sure that it would help the situation for them to go into the media section.
So I find much of this disruptive as it is, and yet we have to comply. And I'm just saying, I think we need to be consistent about where these materials are kept. And again, it doesn't prevent someone from taking it from the office to a space with.
So how would we get all of the material that is being requested into the front office? Like,
So-
that seems like it's a lot of storage.
So if I can address that, again, it's not, what it's requiring is the information that's in the curriculum, right? Not every library book or all the stuff that's in the media center. That's what the disconnect was. Why take stuff that isn't normally in the media center and put it in the media center, right? But it also says here, to meet any review periods required by law, materials also may be made available in the central office. So it could be in both, and if we just say it can be in both, and either one meets the requirement, then it satisfies it.
So I guess this is my question. Ms. Evans and Mr. Haggerty, do you feel strongly that it needs to be consistent in the policy? Because ultimately, if you're requesting curricula, you're probably going to ask the teacher for the curricula in the first place, and probably not the front office. Because that would be the person, to Dr. Crane's point, and Brian Glendenny's point, is that their preference is that a teacher provide the curriculum and walk them through it. So at this point, I don't know that it matters, but to your point, if it's for consistency, then I'm happy to take a vote on the amendment, or we'll move on. Dr. Ng and then Mr. Hershey.
I'm just trying to be pragmatic here, and it goes back to my original, my question earlier. Is it really the space that you're supposed to be, like the actual room that you're supposed to be putting all your information in, or is it actually the people that are in the
I'm
school?
totally with you. I just think I think they have to know that it exists in the building, and
Right.
yeah,
right.
that's my personal.
So I don't want to
agree with
overread
you.
this.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Hershey.
I was just going to ask if we actually had to specify a location in this one, or we could provide schools with flexibility that they come up with the location on their own.
You absolutely could do that. And
Yeah,
I was
that's
just
a
going
really
to
good point.
suggest you have
That's a
such
great point.
a range of great options here, from just all that the statute requires is that parents have the opportunity to inspect the materials. It
I
doesn't
think
say
we can
where
totally say that.
or
That-
who shows it to
Copy
them.
available at the school.
So you could go silent on it, or just say each school will develop a procedure for discharging.
just say it's
parents.
available.
Just make it available at
I
each
am
school. Leave it up to each
happy
school
with
principal.
that. I thought, I misunderstood that because we were spelling out a location, that was required. But if it's not
It's not.
required, let's not have it
Yeah,
in
that's-
there.
That's NCSBA language.
Yeah.
You're free to change it.
Yeah, that's why I was like, let's just go to the minimal threshold. A copy of the materials that will be used in the curriculum will be available.
Period.
Yep,
At each school.
that works.
Will be available for review.
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be the copy of the materials that will be used in these curriculum will be available for inspection at each school.
That works for me. Looks like I have a head shake, so I won't take a vote on it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hershey. Ms. Coffin?
On item number X, I'm assuming, or maybe I shouldn't assume, when we have different things, it says student experiencing homelessness, does it have the links when somebody pulls it up? Because we just see, shaded black and
Right.
crossed out and blue. Will they have the link there? Because if they're looking up this information, clearly it's 14 pages and it has a lot of stuff. So if they find what they're looking for, will it have the link for them to go and see what that is?
That would be my job, to put links in there if you would like links in addition to references.
Yeah, I think it would make it easier for people to navigate through such a very loaded policy anyway. What do you
Agreed,
think?
but the next board will have to remember that once you put policy links, you have to update those links when those policies change, because they're not forever in the same location. But yes, it's just something you'd have to be conscious of.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, Dr. Crane, you just might have walked right on into that one, but thank you.
We'll get it taken care of.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions about section
C,
we can move on to section D, and I'm going to note the time is about 12 till 5.
Thank you.
Section D provides a list of activities for which parental permission is required. There are 11 items there. We did, in the draft edition, you will see item number 4, we revised, I say we in the royal sense, as all of us in the room, you revised to say students' participation in interscholastic sports.
Yes.
And that's what we have. That was the prior revision in section D.
It took us a while to get there. Let's not revisit it.
Any questions about items in section D?
I recall that conversation.
And that hugs the language of the statute.
It did.
Okay.
Yep.
Hearing none, we'll move on to section E. Section E is entirely based on Senate Bill 49 and addresses parental involvement in the student health, physical and mental. So these are procedures that are listed. Item number 1, parent notifications regarding student physical and mental health. Item number 2, discussions related to student well-being. Item number 3, parent access to student records. 4, student support services training. 5, instruction on gender identity, sexual activity, and sexuality. 6, remedies for parental concerns. And we have detailed those. Do you have questions about items in section E?
And you'll note we made changes to this section as well in our previous policy meeting.
And most of the edits in blue text there are my suggestions to just give you a little more flexibility as a board in how you handle parent appeals, given that you have, many more parents per board member as compared to other districts and won't necessarily be able to grant a full hearing in every case. So it just gives you more flexibility.
Ms. Edmonds?
Thank you. Number 1, with regard to the pronouns, so if a child asks a teacher or another staff member to call them by a different name or pronoun, is that employee allowed, or within the law, within this policy, to inform the student that they cannot comply with that request without letting their parents know? Can the staff member let the student know that, sure, but I have to tell your parents?
And your question is about pronoun changes or changes in names, so that's not addressed in
Pronoun.
this policy, I don't.
It is.
It is.
Oh, okay, which
Yeah.
section?
It's in section 1,
The
The
third
parent
paragraph.
notification.
and we have worked on that.
Okay, yes, we
Lisa,
did.
you want to speak to that?
So our practice and what schools have been instructed to do is that the teacher will let them know that they're going to fulfill their request and that they will not use that name or pronoun until the parent has been notified per the law.
Thank you, Ms. Luke. Okay. Any other questions, including Neil's changes in this section? Ms. Caulfield?
In regards to that, notifying them, is that something they have to do in writing?
No. No, it's not something that they're required to do in writing. Our practice, though, it will be noted for the process of feasibility, right? We don't want to notify the same parent over and over and over again, so we're going to make notes in our records that the parent was notified.
So they'll note how they were notified? I asked because I did actually receive a call unrelated to this specific item where the parent they had an app, and she didn't look at the app for a certain amount of days. It had nothing to do with this particular thing, but I was just wondering, in this circumstance, how do we notify them? Because she had said to me, I didn't see it until it was past the time.
I see. So the law does not require the method in which we communicate, and so it's the method that the school would normally use to communicate, and each school obviously has a different process for that.
And do you anticipate we're going to get more guidance on this, or no?
No.
Okay.
And do they require acknowledgement from the parent, or just that they left a message somewhere?
I'm looking at Neil, but I don't believe the law requires acknowledgement of the notification.
It's just notice, not more specific than that. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Archie? Oh, Mr. Henry, sorry, I didn't see it.
We've had some questions regarding with what the pronoun piece of this and how it is impacted, or how Title IX may impact it. We've had emails, and it's been brought up at board meetings. Are there thoughts on that for the board?
I mean, that might be a good closed session discussion for a work session or a board meeting in terms of all the ins and outs. I mean, I can say at a sort of high level, I have heard some advocates make arguments that certain parts of this law may violate Title IX. There's certainly no court case that
I was
has.
about to say, there's a court case, we'll know.
There will be probably litigation. I do expect there will be litigation, and at some point we'll have appellate precedent. At this point, we don't have any, and so there's not, there's nothing in the law that just clearly and without any question violates Title IX. If that were the case, you would have had plenty of discussion about that already. So I think there's a legal theory that some advocates have been floating. It will need to be tested, and we'll see what the courts do with that when those cases arise.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm concerned about Section 6. And again, I'm jumping from the different documents, but I believe this is remedies for parental concerns. And it looks like the stricken related to student health, so it's any concerns. Is that right? And so then now in any concerns, we have the process that's described here. We talk about if the principal cannot resolve the parent's written concern within 7 days, does that mean resolve it to the parent's satisfaction?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Or, like if the parent has asked for something illegal or against state policy and we can't do it,
right.
Is it resolved or does it keep going?
I think that would not be considered resolved. I think resolved is implicitly to the parent's satisfaction. But the requirement is that the principal attempt to resolve the concern, and regardless of whether the concern is quote, resolved or not, there must be written notification to the parent about what the principal's decision is. So to your example, if the request is to do something that's clearly and patently illegal, the principal will have to say, no, that won't be resolved. It can be appealed.
Well, and board members, it doesn't even have to be illegal as much as it could just be completely impractical. Let's say you have a family that moves here that I'll pick on some friends of mine. One of the parents is from Canada, and they demand that every day for the Pledge of Allegiance, they also do the Canadian Pledge of Allegiance. And the principal and the teacher say they don't want to do that. Well, the parent is insistent, and it has to go then through the principal to the superintendent up to the board level. because we didn't like that we didn't do the Canadian Pledge of Allegiance, or just any complaint about any issue has to go through this
Not
process?
any issue, though.
No.
But it's
Okay.
only issues arising under Section E of the policy. So the Canadian national anthem would not fall,
Okay.
fortunately, would not fall in any of those categories.
Yeah,
So
It
it's
is-
any,
this
it's only
doesn't
anything
replace
related
our
to health?
current
It is
complaint
related to health?
procedure.
It's not exclusively health, that's why we struck that language,
Okay.
because it's Section E. Well, I think
Has
there's, yeah, there,
student record, access to student records,
Exactly.
student
Okay.
support services training.
And I apologize, just because I have so
Yep.
many different
Yeah, no,
documents
it's-
open, I
Right.
can't track
Yep.
which one this is, so, all right. So there are some guide rails in terms of what the conflict can be about.
yes.
But no matter what it is, so long as, if the parent wants to keep pursuing it, they can keep pursuing it?
Right. I think it's not, again, there's a serious lack of definitions and standards in SB 49, as you probably noticed or heard from by now. So there's no definition or explanation about what it means to resolve a concern, but the requirement is that if the concern is not resolved, there must be notice of the principal's decision and an appeal right. So I take that to mean if the parent considers it resolved, it's resolved. If the parent does not, the parent may appeal. And it's almost a guaranteed right of appeal to the superintendent and board over anything arising under Section E of the policy, any dispute under that section.
So anything that they could claim has a wellness or mental health impact?
No, it would have to be a little more specific than that. So, the discussion related to student well-being covered by Section 2 of the policy. I mean, not anything in the universe of student well-being.
Okay.
And that's why we have included some more specific requirements in the first paragraph of the section, subsection 6, to ask the parent to be fairly specific about what the concern is, so that we can identify on the front end, is this indeed subject to
Okay.
these expedited appeal procedures or not? I do predict you will see some parent complaints and concerns that will actually just be ordinary grievances or complaints that you have other policies to address. So the front line work to be done here at the school level will be to assess the parent complaint and see if it is indeed subject to these requirements.
In the interest of time, I'll just review between now and first reading, because there's a lot of depths, but I need to read it a little more closer. Thank you. Thank you all.
Dr. E?
I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, even though it seems kind of wide open, I mean, it does provide kind of a roadmap for parents if they were to wanting to pursue what is the next step. So, I mean, I know that's not what people want to hear, but that is the roadmap that is laid out. It seems like to me from my interpretation. But it does. I agree that the resolve is a kind of a nebulous kind of word. So I do agree. So.
Thank you. Ms. Caulfield?
I think the whole point of this is transparency and giving the parents some kind of like guidance, right? For when they do need help. So I don't actually see anything wrong with the language. Sometimes we are painting our picture or a picture that these parents, like we're just trying to avoid any situation that could come along. When at the end of the day, when a parent is coming to us, they're really coming because they need our help, right? So for me, the first assumption is that the parent is concerned about what's happening with the child. So I don't see any problem with the language that, they have 7 days, they can make a complaint. It could be about anything, really, right? I mean, on any given day without this policy, if a parent is really upset or unhappy with something that's happening with their child, they would go to the principal. And if they didn't get a valid response in their eyes, they would escalate it and they would go to somebody else. And it does happen to us day in and day out. I think this is just giving specific language of how they can follow that if they really feel that something is happening with their child or something that is happening that they're uncomfortable with. I just think it's all transparency.
All right. Dr. Gray, we're ready.
All right. Section F has to do with parental requests for information. It details processes, timelines, and appeal procedures here. This is the you request some information, respond in 10 days. And if, unless additional time is needed, and then it may be extended to 20 days. And then there are some procedures and timeline appeal procedures behind that.
All of which are statutory.
Yes, all of which are statutory.
Makes it easier. Thank you. Deal's like, that's just what it is. All right.
We did add some additional language
Yes, the
just to
blue.
give, board review, chair and vice chair, et cetera. Nothing subject to, the board's decision is final and not subject to judicial review here. And we did specify for purposes of Section F that we're talking about business days, not including Saturdays and Sundays, vacation days, holidays, et cetera.
That's a good
Yes,
decision.
thank you for pointing that out, and that is not statutory, that is, but it's consistent with the statute, so the blue text is added. Thank you.
And this information will be on our website regarding Parents' Bill of Rights and how parents may access those rights. Section G is about community services available, and as I have shared with you earlier, where we say a list of community services available to parents and families is available here, that here will be a link to a web page on our district website that provides a list of those. We are in the process of collecting that list, creating that list from departments internally who we know have lists of resources that they provide families. And staff are working internally to put that together. We'll make that available. And then we'll work to keep that up to date for families. And then finally, in the last section, these are the reporting requirements as required by statute. Do you have any further questions that we can answer for you?
Mr. Hershey?
Not really related to this, but as we define a business day, is that something that should be throughout all policies, or is that, I'm just wondering why we're specifically doing it just for Section F?
I believe we did that. We have set out very specific definitions of our processes and timelines in our complaint and grievance policies. Where that is not dictated by statute, we have provided a similar layout here. I think, and I'll ask Neil if he has any further information
Yeah, it's a
on
good
that.
question. That's my vague recollection as well. I'd have to trek back on my notes from when discussing this previously with Dr. Crane, but I think we did not include a definition of days when the statute used the word days and didn't define it, and it wasn't clear that our local definition would be consistent with the statute or not, and we did include the definition when we were comfortable that that was not going to run into that problem.
Right.
That was my recollection.
Yeah, that's my recollection, too.
Yeah,
I mean,
but we could revisit it. It's a good point. If, my preference would be to have a across-the-board definition for how you count
Yes.
days, if we could do that. And I think we concluded that was potentially problematic. We could certainly revisit
That's
it.
what I was getting at. I think that would
Yeah.
make sense, just from my perspective.
As
Happy
long
to
as we
take a
don't
look.
run into a statute issue, is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
we can certainly explore that and come and bring that information back to the board or to the policy committee.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Crane.
We
Thank
will be
you.
bringing this for first read next week. The Précis is already submitted, so I'll get the backup revised and ready for submitting tomorrow. So the first read will be next week, next Tuesday at our December 5th meeting. Our second read will be at our December 19th meeting, and then at that meeting, you will hopefully second read approve, and we will adopt this policy.
I'll entertain a motion to move it to first reading.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and second. All in favor, please note by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Dr. Crane, for giving us the next steps. And we will thank you all for working within my timeline. I think Dr. Robinson was gritting his teeth, making sure I make my flight, so thank you all for your patience. So we'll officially adjourn. Thank you all.